Welcome to my channel. If this is the first time you are visiting this YouTube channel, my name is Nilesh. Today we are going to see how to use imperative commands to create Kubernetes objects. Like my last video, I used the YouTube feature, which is the communities, to ask the viewers of my channel what they would like to see. And this time the response was quite good in a sense that we had a clear winner, and that person was, or that option was the Kubernetes certification exam tips on imperative commands, which had 73% voting. Out of the 11 people who voted, 73% of the people said that they were interested in watching a video related to this exam tips on imperative commands. So let's get started. Let's close this browser window. And before we get started with today's session, it's Chinese New Year here in Singapore. So if you are celebrating Chinese New Year across the globe, wish you all a very happy and a prosperous Lunar New Year. So what are we going to do in this session? This session is about the tips that I shared earlier in my exam tips videos for the CKA, the Certified Kubernetes Administrator, and CKAD, the Certified Kubernetes Application Developer exams. This is not just for CKA or CKAD or CKS Kubernetes exams. What I'm going to show can be used in your day-to-day life to use the imperative commands with Kubernetes and to make your life easier, to work faster with Kubernetes. And in the exams, or with regards to the exam, clearly it's a huge time saver. You can save quite a lot of time if you know how to use these commands. If you work with Kubernetes, you know that there are different ways in which we can create Kubernetes objects. There are the manifest files, which can be created using a JSON or YAML format, which are a descriptive way of describing how we want to create a particular Kubernetes object, like a pod or a service or deployment. And then there is the imperative way, which is using the kubectl command line utilities or kubectl command to give the set of instructions. So in this discussion, we will focus more on the command line option or the imperative commands. And we will look at least 2 or 3 different commands which we can use. The first thing I want to show you is how to find out what are the short form of the commands. Again, these commands, they have various short forms, and we can use those to reduce the typing. So I've given a command here, which is KAPI resources, or I've used alias or alias, you can call it whichever way you want. I did a video on that as well, how to set up aliases so that you reduce the typing of the whole kubectl command line. If you want, you can go back and watch that video. I provide a link in the description of this, as well as in the hints here, or as a card. So in this output, we can see that there are different types of objects which are available when we use the KAPI resources, and they have, some of them have the short names, like the config maps. The short name is CM. The endpoints have short name as EP. Namespaces have short name as NS, nodes, NO, PVC for persistent volume claim, PV for persistent volume, and so on and so forth. So let's say the usual thing is, I assume that kubectl is aliased as K. If you want to find out what are the pods which are running, we usually type kget pods. That's a typical thing we do. Instead of this, we can use the short form and we can say kget PO. PO is the short form for pods. If you want to get the nodes, we can also say kget NO for nodes. And same way, we can use these short forms. So this helps to reduce the typing to one extent. Now, going to the next level, there are this kubectl cheat sheet, which is also available. And I highly recommend that when you start preparing for these exams, go through these commands of the cheat sheet. It also gives us how to enable kubectl auto-completion, so we can auto-complete while we are typing the commands. So we don't have to remember the object names and things like that. This will be automatically completed in our test environment. So this gives a list of commands, like these are all imperative commands. And we have commands to work with the context, kubectl context. Then for creating the objects, like using a manifest file, we can use kubectl apply. Then we can use explain commands. So this gives a list of various commonly used commands as part of the cheat sheet. The other useful reference that I find is this kubectl reference docs. And here we have, again, different types of top level commands, and there is subcommands. And then there is also the example here, or very handy quick start kind of thing. So let's look at, say, for example, service. We are looking at the create option under the getting started, and then service. So it starts with the usage. We have the kubectl create service, and then it also gives us what are the different flags this particular command supports. So we have things like template, TCP, save config, output, try run. Some of these, like the output and try run, these are like in most cases the command common command line flags. So they can be used with almost all the commands. And we also have an example here. So this way we can quickly take this whatever is shown in the example and then use it in our exam. So this can help us reduce quite a bit of time. So assume that we have a question which says create a particular object. Now let's think about pod, for example. And in the CKAD bookmarks, I have created some low-level or very granular bookmarks, which I talked about in my earlier videos. So if you look at the manifest definition, we have this manifest here for creating a pod with resources. If we take this and then we try to create the manifest out of this, usually it will take some time to copy this, then paste it. So instead of doing this, let me go to the sample question and what could come up in the exam. So let's say we have this first question, which is to create an NGINX pod and set an environment variable, which is called as var1, and the value for that environment variable is value1. How can we create this? If we use the long form using the manifest, we can copy this YAML definition or the declarative syntax, and we can go create a file using VI editor and paste this content and then make the changes. So this one will obviously take some time. Instead of doing this, let's look at the question again. To create an NGINX pod and set an environment variable, we can do this very quickly using the imperative command. So let's look at the example. So I can say krun. The name of the pod here is NGINX, and the image that we want to use here is NGINX. Let's go back and verify the question. It doesn't say which version or which tag of the image has to be used. So we can just use the default NGINX image. And then we have to use the environment variable, which is named as var1, and the value for that environment variable is value1. This is one way of creating the NGINX object, but this is already existing. So let's go and delete this first. Okay, delete or PO, and the name of the pod is NGINX. If we get the pods here, so there is only one API server pod running. So let's go and create that using the imperative syntax again. So we are using this krun. NGINX is the name of the pod, image is NGINX, and we are giving environment as variable one, value one. And we can see that it has created pod. We can verify this by running kget pod commands, kgpo, and we have one NGINX pod up and running. We can also use kdescribe pod, and then name of the pod is NGINX, and we will get a complete description of that particular pod. Instead of doing this again, in the interest of time, I will use a short form, because usually in the questions or in the exam, we want to verify that whatever we did in terms of setting of that environment variable was set correctly or not. So we can exec into that pod using kexec, using the IT as the parameters or flags for interactive terminal, and then name of the pod, and we echo the var1 value. This is not showing. It's like a syntax error. Let's use a slightly different version of that, which gives the path to the sh file. So this one is working. It's fine. So we have the same NGINX, and then we pass which command has to be executed. So using a shell, we are passing a command and then using echo to echo the value of var1 variable. So this way, we can quickly find what is the value set for that particular environment variable. That was one example where we can use the imperative command. Similarly, there are other types of questions which have this command, or where we can use this command. In the exam, be it CKA or CKAD, you might get a question something like this: create a deployment with an image, NGINX with a specific tag 1.18.0. This should be called as NGINX. It should have 2 replicas, and it should use port as 80. And they're saying that don't use this, don't create a service for this deployment. And the additional thing is to create this in the Jupyter namespace. So the first thing we can do here is create the namespace. So create ns, and we give the name of the namespace. We can then use get namespace, and we should have Jupyter here. We can also give the name and find or shortlist only one particular namespace here. And once we have the namespace created, then we can go and create that deployment which was requested. So I will use a pre-created command, but you can do it on the fly here. So create deploy. Deploy is the short form for deployment. Again, I'm using all the places wherever possible the short form, so that any typo which can happen while typing a lengthy word or a lengthy command can be avoided. The whole thing about these Kubernetes exams is about time management. Every time you save, every few seconds you save is an added advantage for you, and it gives you that leeway where you can use that time more efficiently for some other difficult problems. So coming back to the question, then we are creating a deployment here. Name of that deployment is NGINX. Image which we are using is NGINX with 1.18.0 tag. Replicas as 2. Port we are exposing is 80. And I'm using a dry run to first see that this particular command that I'm trying to execute works fine. I've not made any syntax error or I've not made any mistake here. And the part which is missing here is the namespace which was requested. So the namespace where this had to be created was Jupyter. So I added that -n. You can also use -- namespace, but again, as I said, the whole point about this demo or this video is to show how to use imperative commands and how to use them in the shortest period of time. So we will use the shortest form of the namespace flag, which is -n. We give the name of the namespace, Jupyter, and then the dry run as client and output as yum. So if the command is successful, if everything is fine with our command, we would get a output in the YAML format. And this is what would be applied to our Kubernetes cluster to create a deployment. So you can see that the kind is deployment. It's choosing the right API version, apps v1. The labels are applied. Name is given as NGINX, namespace is Jupyter, 2 replicas, and the images here for the containers. So everything looks fine. The port that we gave here in the imperative command has been converted to container port as the YAML declarative variable or declarative field. So once this is fine, let's remove the try run field, and we can apply this to our cluster. And then we can use kget deploy command to get the details about the deployment. So we can see that in the default namespace, there is nothing. So I should again provide the namespace as Jupyter here, because this deployment would be created in the Jupyter namespace. Same way, we can also find, instead of deployment, the replica sets, which would have been created as part of this deployment. So kget rs is the short form for short name for replica set. So we see there is one replica set which is created with 2 desired count and 2 are ready. And then we can also get the pods. So I have an alias here for KGPO. So I will use that with the namespace as Jupyter, and we see 2 pods for the NGINX. So in this example, what we saw is how to use the dry run flag before we run the command. Let's go and use one more example, which is about updating the image or the rollout part. So I would say this is like a subtask of the first or second question related to creating an NGINX deployment. Now the question is to update the NGINX image to version or tag 1.90. Our current tag is 1.80 and we want to update it to 1.19 version. So this can be done in multiple ways. First thing is we can take the current deployment like get then deploy, name of the deployment, NGINX, and then we can take the output as YAML file and then make that change. The image tag can be changed to 1.19 and then reapply that particular deployment. The easier way is to use again an imperative command, which is to say kset image for the deployment named NGINX and the container NGINX to 1.19.8 version. And I keep doing this mistake, which is not to specify the namespace. So again, this should be applied on the Jupyter namespace, and we can watch out for this, or we can see how the rollout history is going for this particular deployment. So we can see here that there have been 2 revisions, 1 and 2, and then we can again go back and check that the deployment is fine, the replica set is fine. So we have this image which is updated. If we do the describe part, kget deploy instead of kget, if I do the describe here for the deployment, we can see what is the image which is applied. So in the details, we can see that it's in the namespace Jupyter and the container image is 1.19.8. So this is how we can verify that whatever changes we are doing, they are fine. They are working correctly as expected. The third thing I want to show, and the last question here, is regarding how to create a job with the image of Busybox, which executes a command called echo with 3 subcommands inside. So it will echo hello, then it will sleep for 30 seconds, and then it will print the hello world or echo world again. So for this question again, we can use this imperative command create. We are creating a job here instead of a pod or a deployment, and the name of that job is Busybox. We're using the image as Busybox image, and then we are providing a command parameter or the overriding the default command by using this shell script, and the command is hello and sleep and the word. So this is already existing. Let's go and deploy this in the namespace, Jupyter namespace. Okay, let's go delete job. So cron job, the name is Busybox. There are no resources found. We don't have the job, but still it is showing that it failed to create a job here, Busybox. Okay, for the purpose of this demo, let's change the name of that job, and we say live demo Busybox. And we have the live demo Busybox created here. Okay, So with that, what we saw in this particular demo is how to use the imperative command to speed up our flow while answering the questions instead of taking a lengthy YAML file and then editing it. The amount of time that it takes to copy paste from the Kubernetes documentation, then onto the VI editor, and then if there is any, let's say, problem with indentation or typo, or let's say we have to check the name of the object, all this can be time consuming. So this can be avoided using these imperative commands, and they can really help you to go faster during the exam. So I hope you find this useful. In case you found this video useful, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends and family. Thank you. Thanks for watching this video.